We indeed left at the very beginning of chapter 3. Now, as you wonder, is who is the swamp monster? Right when the swamp monster was gonna reveal itself, chapter 2 finished. Now, chapter 3. I am wondrous of whom the monster is. Shivers were truly on me, literally. Literally finished chapter 2 and I was like, what the shivers? Charlie, what are you doing down there? Mum cried, marching into the clearing. I thought you kids were watching him. Charlie? I'd forgotten all about Charlie. Charlie was the swamp monster. So Charlie was the dog, was the swamp monster. I've been looking all over you, Mum snapped angrily. Didn't we tell you to stay by the car? Dad and I have been searching everywhere. Sorry, Mum, I apologized. I couldn't say any more. Charlie leaped on me and knocked me down into the mud. Charlie, off, I shouted, but he planted his huge paws on my shoulders and licked my face. I was covered in mud, totally covered. Come on, boy, Clark tugged on Charlie's collar. You were scared, Gretchen. You thought Charlie was the swamp monster, Clark laughed. You really were scared. I was not, I sputtered, wiping the mud from my jeans. I was just trying to scare you. You were really scared. Just admit it, Clark insisted. Just admit it. I was not scared. My voice started to rise. Who was the one begging to go back? I reminded him. You. What's all the fighting about that the dad demanded? And what are you two doing way out here? Didn't I tell you to stay near the car? Sorry, Dad. I apologized. But we were kind of bored, just waiting around. What do you mean we? It was all Gretchen's idea, Clark protested. She was the one who wanted to explore the swamp. That's enough, Dad scolded. Everyone back to the car. Clark and I argued all the way back. Charlie trotted by my side, flinging more mud on my jeans. The flat tire had been fixed, but now Dad had to get the car back on the road. And it wasn't easy. Every time he stepped on the accelerator, the tires just spun around and around in the thick mud. Finally, we were all out. Finally, we all got out and pushed. Now, Mum and Clark were splattered with mud too. So everyone muddy. As we drove away, I stared out the dark, eerie marsh, and I listened to the night sounds, sharp chitters, low moans, shrill cries. I heard lots of stories about the swamp monsters, and I'd read some ancient legends about them. Could they be real? I wondered. Do swamp monsters really exist? Little did I know that I would soon find out the answer to that question, the hard way. So the title is How to Kill a Monster. Would the monster be a swamp monster by chance? I wonder, I truly do. Yes, they do. No way, I told Dad. They can't be where they live. That's their house. Oh, okay, never mind. Let's reread this one more time, because I thought we were talking about a monster. But they are talking about the grandma's and the grandfather's house. Yes, they do. No way, I told Dad. That can't be where they live. That's their house, Dad insisted as the car bumped a narrow sandy road. That's Grandpa and Grandpa's house. That can't be their house, Clark rubbed his eyes. It's a swamp mirage. I read about them in Creatures from the Muck. The swamp mud plays tricks on your eyes. It makes you see things. See what I mean about Clark? He really does believe in the stuff he reads. And it was beginning to sound right to me too. How else could you explain Grandma and Grandpa's house? A castle? A castle in the middle of a swamp? Almost hidden in grove of the dark, towering trees. Dad pulled the car up to the front door. I stared at the house in the glow of the headlights. 3 stories high, built of dark grey stone. A turret rose up on the right side. On the left, a silver of white smoke curled from a back-end chimney. I thought swamp houses were smaller, I murmured, and built on stilts. That's the way they look in my comics, Clark agreed. And what's with the windows? His voice shook. Are they vampires or something? I stared at the windows. They were tiny, and I could see only 3 of them. They were tiny, and I could only see 3 of them. 3 tiny windows in the entire house, one on each floor. Come on, kids, Mum said, let's get our luggage. Get your luggage. Mum, Dad, and Clark climbed out the car and headed for the boot. I stood by the car door with Charlie. The night air felt cold and damp on my skin. I stared up at the big. I stared up at the big dark house, almost hidden behind the trees in the middle of nowhere. And then I heard the howl, a mournful howl, from somewhere deep in the swamp. A chill swept through me. Charlie pressed against my leg. I bent to pet him. What could I be? I whispered to the dog in the dark. What kind of creature howls like that? Gretchen! Gretchen! Mum waved from the front door of the house. Everyone else had gone inside. Oh, my grandpa said, and I stepped into the dim entrance. This can't be our little Gretchen. She wrapped her frail arms around me and gave me a big hug. She smelt just the way I had remembered. Musty. I glanced at Clark. He rolled his eyes. I stepped back and forced a smile. Move aside, Rose, Grandpa yelled. Let me get a look at her. He's a little hard of hearing, Dad whispered to me. Grandpa clasped my hand between his wrinkled fingers. He and Grandma seemed so slight, so fragile. We're real happy you're here, Grandpa exclaimed. Her blue eyes, Grandma explained. Her blue eyes wrinkled. We don't get many visitors. For a while, we thought you weren't coming, Grandpa shouted. We expected you hours ago. Flat tire, Dad explained. Tired? Grandpa wrapped his arms around Dad. Well, then come in and sit down, son. Well, yeah, hard of hearing indeed he is. Clark giggled. Mom shoved an elbow into his side. Grandpa and Grandma led us into the living room. The room was enormous. Our whole house could probably fit inside it. Damn. The living room was as big as someone's house. The walls were painted green, drab green. I stared up at the ceiling, up at the iron chandelier that had 12 candles in a circle. An enormous fireplace took up most of the wall. You know, at times I want to look to the listener, to the perceiver, to the absorber, but that then distracts me. Because many times, even in primary school, when we were doing a play, when we were speaking, we should be, whenever we are reading in primary school, they advised us to look at the audience while I was reading from a page. That's a skill, to be fair. That's a skill. The enormous fireplace took up an enormous fireplace took up most of the wall. The other walls were covered with black and white photographs, yellowed with age. Photographs everywhere, of people I didn't recognize, probably dead relatives, I thought. I glanced through a doorway into the next room, the dining room. It appeared to be as big as the living room, just as dark, just as dreary. Clark and I sat down at a tattered green couch. I felt the old springs sag under the weight. Charlie groaned and stretched out the floor. Charlie groaned and stretched out on the floor at our feet. For a second, I forgot who Charlie was. I thought, the boy is doing this, but that's the dog. I glanced around the room at the pictures, at the worn rug, at the shabby tables and chairs. The flickering light high above us made our shadows dance on the dark walls. This place is creepy, Clark whispered, and it really smells bad, worse than Grandma and Grandpa. I choked back a laugh, but Clark was right. The room smelled strange, damp and sour. Why do two old people want to live like this, I wondered, in this musty, dark house, deep in the swamp? Would anyone like something to drink? Grandma interrupted my thoughts. How about a nice cup of tea? Clark and I shook our heads, no. Mom and Dad also said no. They sat opposite us. The stuffing in the chair spilled out of the back. Well, you're finally here, Grandpa yelled to us. It's just great. So tell me, how come you are late? Grandpa, Grandma shouted to him. No more questions. Then she turned to us. After such a long trip, you must be starving. Come to the kitchen. I made my special chicken pot pie just for you. We followed Grandma and Grandpa into the kitchen. It looked like all the other rooms, dark and dingy. But it didn't smell as ancient as the other rooms. The tangy aroma of chicken pot pie floated through the air. I thought I'm gonna do a burp, but I did not. Grandma removed 8 small pies from the oven, one for each of us, and a couple of extras in case we were starving, my guests. Grandma placed one on my plate, and I began to dig right in. I was starving. As I lifted the fork to my mouth, Charlie sprang up from his place on the floor and started to sniff. He sniffed our chairs, the worktop, the floor. He leaped up to the table and sniffed. Charlie, stop, Dad ordered down. Charlie jumped from the table, then he reared up in front of us and curled his upper lip. He let out a growl, a low, menacing growl that erupted into a loud barking, furious barking. What on earth is wrong with him? Grandma demanded, frowning at the dog. I don't know, Dad told him. He's never done that before. What is it, Charlie? I asked. I shoved my chair from the table and approached him. Charlie sniffed the air. He barked. He sniffed some more. He sniffed some more. A chill of fear washed over me. What is it, boy? What do you smell? And then we go to chapter 5. We finish chapter 3. We finish chapter 4. And then chapter 5. Is he smelling the pot? The chicken pot pie? Or is there something in the air that's of a differ to the pot pie, chicken pot pie? Is a chicken pot pie made of something that's bad? I wonder, I truly do. But chapter 5 is gonna wait. Nice little wonder upon this. Charlie, how do you play in this book? I wonder what Charlie's role is in this book. This seems like it is something.